a new Chevy, Nissan, Toyota, or Hyundai? Come to any McCarthy Auto Group location and register for a chance to shoot your way into a brand new vehicle during the Big 12 tournament. See McCarthy Auto Group for details.
Welcome back. You're listening to Track Talk here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. I'm Kirk Elliott. Scott will be rejoining us in just a little while. Don't forget, McCarthy's Big 12 Shootout is going on right now. Register at any one of the 7 McCarthy Auto Group dealerships and 4 collision centers. Register to be able to shoot for a free car coming up on March 15th down at the Kansas City Power and Light District in conjunction with the Big 12 Tournament. And you can find out more by going to kccars.com. Today will be the induction ceremony for the annual Central Auto Racing Boosters Hall of Fame. And looking forward to this event. 8 new members will be inducted. Congratulations go to Diana Green, Leroy Holler Jr., Linda Lose, Herschel Wagner, Terry Watlin, Al Burke Sr., and Cliff Woody Woodward. And the 8th member of the Hall of Fame that will be going in tonight is Bob Kosiski, who was a legendary driver out of the Omaha area, and a lot of people know his 3 sons that raced, Joe, Steve, and Ed, and he's got several grandchildren also in racing, a big family. The Kosiski family is just as much a part of racing in Omaha as anything that has ever been. I remember watching Bob Kosiski at the old Sunset Speedway, and got a lot of memories watching the number 53 going around the racetrack, and he's joining us right now. Bob, thank you for joining us this morning. Congratulations going into the Hall of Fame. What's it feel like? I know you had some racing experience here in the Kansas City area. A lot of good memories down here, but what's it mean for you to be inducted into the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame?
I'll tell you, I'm really, really honored and really excited to be inducted into there, because I really enjoyed racing down in the Kansas City area, because I figured all the people down there treated me like I was one of them, and it was like home to me, and it really felt good to race down there.
And I know your son Joe would agree with that. Some of his best experiences winning the NASCAR National Championship was racing here in the Kansas City area as well. So Kosiski, name well known here in Kansas City. But first of all, you could have raced, you did race with the stars of NASCAR and the Cup Series back when you first got started. You could have been a key player in the NASCAR Cup Series back in the early 60s. Matter of fact, in 1960, you raced in the Daytona 500. Why did you have thoughts of going that route? And if so, why didn't you try to go and race with NASCAR back in the early days?
Well, the reason I didn't, we had good luck down there, and we was doing real good, and we had plans of going back into NASCAR the following year. We run another year of IMCA, but on one of the next races of IMCA of their series, we won the race, and we was on our way home from the races, and we got into a car accident, and my father got killed, and that just threw everything out of character for us, and we just didn't have the ability without him or the finances to continue on.
Now, that 1960 day, you were in the famous Daytona 500 where Junior Johnson won, and he figured out the draft. You were there racing in that race. It was the second Daytona 500. What are your memories about that race?
Well, I was really like to race there. I mean, I thought I was doing fair, and but we had a rear end go out about halfway through the race, and it knocked us out of the race, so we couldn't continue on.
What were your thoughts when you first saw Daytona International Speedway, when you went in there? Were you intimidated at all by that racetrack?
Not really. Yes, it was a fast track, and it was different anything that I ever raced on. I raced on a lot of the bigger tracks. Sedalia was a mile, and Springfield, Illinois, and that was a mile track. But there was nothing compared to the speed you had at Daytona.
Now, you credit, looks like your biggest win happened that year at the Minnesota State Fair. Talk about that. You raced against guys like Ramo Stott, Ernie Durr, 100-lap race up at the Minnesota State Fair. Talk about that. That you call that your biggest win?
I think that was one of my biggest wins was there because back then Minnesota State Fair was one of the biggest fairs in the United States, and they get so many people there, you know, and you're running in front of 20,000 people. It's really something great to win a race like that. And he was running against Ramo Stott, Ernie Durr, Dick Hutcherson, all of the ones that would, you know, run. And Dick Hutcherson was one of the big stars out of NASCAR, so it was really great for me.
When you raced against competition like that, how did that help you when you decided to stay local and race around the Omaha area?
Well, when you race, you got to figure that no matter who you're racing with, you can beat them no matter whether you get beat or not, because at any track, anybody can beat you. But you always try to feel that when you go to a race that you can beat anybody there. But there's also, they have the same feeling that they can beat you too. So it works both ways.
Talk about some of the tough competitors that you went up against around the Omaha area. Bud Burdick comes to mind. Who are some of the drivers that were tough to beat back around the Omaha area when you were in your heyday?
Well, when I was racing, when I first started and when I was racing good, I had Tiny Lund, Johnny Bocamp, Bud Burdick, that run up here. And then later on, when I went down in the Kansas City area, you had like Joe Wallace and Terry Bivens and Gibbons, Bud and Mike Gibbons. And, you know, wherever you went, Larry Phillips, wherever you went, you had real good competition of racers that always, you know, race good.
You bring up two names that are in the long lore and history of Daytona. Johnny Beauchamp, who nearly won the first ever Daytona 500. Matter of fact, a lot of people thought he did until photo evidence proved otherwise that Lee Petty won. And Tiny Lund, who won the Daytona 500 50 years ago. He was unfortunately killed in an accident down at Talladega in 1975. But talk about those two drivers right there, Tiny Lund from Harlan, Iowa, and Johnny Beauchamp also from around there, I believe, Atlantic, Iowa.
They were good drivers. I mean, they were the best drivers around here at the time. But when I run Playland Park, which was an asphalt track just like that, I could beat them at any day, or they could beat me at any day. I mean, they were good drivers, but like I've said before, anybody can be beat. And I had the same hopes that they did, you know, of going on to go down there and run, but things didn't work out, and that's the way life is. One of
the more successful Sunday night racetracks ever that I can think of was Sunset Speedway right there in Omaha. A huge, very successful Sunday night facility. Talk about why that was so successful, and especially on Sunday nights in Omaha.
I don't know, because I guess it was the way they brought it on. And around here in Omaha, back in them days, there was really nothing else to do on Sunday night. Nowadays, people are so involved with sport with their kids and grandkids, and with going to work on Monday morning, that they have to be home early to get to work on Monday morning, that Sunday night is just not a good night anymore. But Sunday night used to be a real great night here in Omaha, and I don't know why it worked out so great. That's the only reason we can figure out that it worked that good.
And they packed them in. I think they're towards the end, 4,000 or 5,000 a night going to Sunday night races in Omaha. That was certainly...
Yes, they did. They packed them in out here.
Talk about the cars that you drove. Some of the classes of cars that you drove back in the early days on the dirt tracks around Omaha, late models becoming a big thing back in the 60s and early 70s. Just kind of talk about some of the cars that you drove back then.
Mostly I run, what was the old style, the old coupe. In the coupe days is what I started with. And then later on I went into the late models, which we called the late. They were regular cars back then, like your Chevelles and Camaros. And I did race a Ford Fairlane for a while. And we raced them, and then we started getting into the more late models where you had to buy the chassis from a chassis builder and, put the bodies on them and stuff like that. But them were the type cars that I run. I never did run a sprint car or anything like that.
Bob Kosiski is joining us. He's one of the 8 inductees into the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame tonight. Kosiski, an iconic name around the Omaha area. We'll talk about your sons and their racing careers here in just a minute, but wanted to delve into just a little bit about what the transition was. You brought up the fact that you went into the factory chassis and late models, the transition into when you built everything yourself to the tubular chassis and how that transition in dirt late model racing. Just kind of talk about that transition a little bit.
Well, when we built everything ourselves, it was to me it was a lot easier, because when you had to start buying everything and going the other way and start going that way, you had to depend more on the other person's ability. What he had, you tried to buy the best from him, from the guy that was supplying you with the stuff. And I don't really like that as good as building your own stuff, but that's the way everything is nowadays, so I guess we can't go back to the old way.
Did you worry about the future of racing back when it was making that kind of a transition? Here we are today in 2013. The prices of everything have gone out of sight, but racing is still very strong. Does that surprise you?
I don't believe it's price of the parts and the price of the cars and everything. Yes, that hurts, but I think what's involved anymore is to get fans and people into racing. Is the young people don't have a chance to learn how to work on anything. There's very few. Back in the old days, you had every filling station or everything worked on cars, and the kids hung around, a filling station or something like that. But anymore, you don't have that. And that has more to do, I think, than the price of the parts.
Which leads me to your own family. You've got a big family, and some very successful racers are your sons. And were they always interested in becoming racers themselves? Joe, Steve, and Ed, I'm talking about.
Yes, they grew up following me around the racetrack, so, that was their main goal, was to be a racer. So, yes, that's what they always wanted to do as they grew up. The same way with their kids. They all grew up following them, so, they want to be racers.
And did you instill in them that, of course, they've got to work on their own cars to make them go fast? What were some of the things, the biggest things you taught them to become great racers?
Well, if you don't put a lot of dedication into it and work on them to be, everybody is a fair driver or a good driver, and the only way you're going to beat them is if you out-prepare them. And you've got to really put your mind and dedication into working on the car to get every little thing right, because everybody can buy parts, but they got to know how to put them on and how to use them.
And I think you would agree, your sons are Hall of Famers themselves. I know the success that Joe and Steve and Ed have had in racing, and I know Joe, the oldest, he wore that number 53 car very proudly for many, many years out there and won a ton of races out there. How difficult was it for you as a father to watch your sons out there compete against each other?
Well, I really enjoyed that, because that's what they wanted to do, and I enjoyed watching them race, and I was glad that they'd done as good as they did and tried to help them do as good as they could, but they still had to do most of the work on the cars themselves and prepare them for the races.
They wanted to outrun each other too, didn't they? When they got close together out on the racetrack to try to beat each other, what was that feeling like as a father?
Well, I think that was their most competition, is trying to outdo each other, because they were the toughest competition. So if they could outdo each other, they could beat most of the other ones on the track. So that was their goal, to be better than each other. So they tried, but and each one could win their own share of races. So it worked good that way.
And now that they're out of the seat, you got grandchildren you're going out there to watch racing. How different is it with grandchildren than it was with your own sons, watching them perform?
Well, I think it's still about the same. I worry about them, out there. I don't ever want anybody to ever get hurt. That's why I instill on all of them that biggest part of a race car anymore is the safety stuff, because they have got good seats now and head restraints, neck restraints, and the helmets are good. I make sure that every one of them has got that part of it figured out.
Bob Kosiski, our guest here, is one of the 8 inductees into the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame today. It'll be at 4 o'clock this afternoon at the Gladstone Community Center. Looking forward to that event. You just came back from Daytona. You still go down there every year. You were down there to watch everything that was going on, and your family is involved in operating a racetrack, the I-80 Speedway, Nebraska Raceway Park, located right between Lincoln and Omaha. And wanted to bring up to get your thoughts about safety at racetracks. And I know you were down there. I'm not exactly sure where you were on Saturday when the accident happened on the front straightaway at Daytona. But your thoughts about what needs to be done to increase fencing and increase safety for the fans at racetracks. Your thoughts?
I don't know what they can do, because the height of the fence down there is as high as it can go, and everything on the fencing down there is really strong. NASCAR will probably look into it. Maybe they needed some bigger bolts on the beams that held them, or whatever they need. I'm sure NASCAR will, have them do that. But other than that, I felt that everything is pretty safe down at Daytona. But it's all in. It did go up into the stands, but that's why they have the people stay about, they have at our track and that, they have a 10-foot rule that you can't be within 10 feet for another fence, and then another 10 after that away from the racetrack. So I don't know what else they could really do, because there's always a chance, no matter what you do, that something can happen.
What's your overall thoughts of what went on at Daytona during Speed Weeks down there?
Oh, I enjoyed it. The only thing I missed was the flyover, but I guess the government's cut back on their budget, so they can't do that. But other than that, they promoted everything nice. Everything went the way it should, and I went to the dirt track down there, and they had a real good crowd, and all the races down there went real nice. So I thought everything was good. And
you don't miss a year going down there, do you?
No, I missed 1 year, I think, since the 70s. I think I missed 1 year.
That is great. And just before we go, I just want you to comment a little bit about your wife, Grace. She's been there every step of the way. Just tell us what she's meant to you and everything, your involvement in racing.
Well, I guess if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have raced, because you have to, if your kids and everybody's with you, and she drug them along to all the races, and if it meant a lot to me for her to be here. Today's our 56th wedding anniversary.
Today,
so
congratulations!
So I get both. I get both of them today. I get an anniversary and an induction in the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame.
That is outstanding. Well, congratulations. Look forward to seeing you celebrated up to the Gladstone Community Center tonight. Congratulations again on going into the Hall of Fame, Bob. We appreciate you spending time for us here on RacinBoys, and we'll look forward to seeing you today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, there he is, Bob Kosiski, one of the 8 new inductees into the C.A.R.B Hall of Fame. Coming up in the next hour, Terry Wantland will be joining us. That's hour number 2, exclusively on RacinBoys.com.